Välkomna till Shalom över Israels sommarkonferens lördag kväll. Ikväll så blir det mesta av samlingen på engelska. Och ämnet, jag heter Andreas Johansson och jag ska vara värd för ett panelsamtal med Viktor Kalisher som är ledare för Bibelsällskapet i Israel och Tuvia Pollack som också arbetar vid Bibelsällskapet i Jerusalem. Och ämnet är: vad säger vi när vi vill prata om Yeshua i en judisk kontext i Israel? Och så går vi över till engelska, och då betyder det att om ni behöver översättning av något speciellt ord så bara bryt in, så tar vi och översätter ord eller några meningar så där på svenska så att vi får med sammanhanget. Det är helt okej att avbryta, men annars tar vi det på engelska så behöver vi inte använda tid till att översätta. So, Viktor and Tuvia, heartily welcome.
Thank you.
Let's just begin straight ahead. Maybe you can present yourself a little bit. Viktor, you can begin. Just tell us your position and who you are.
So, Viktor Kalisher, and I'm the director of the Bible Society in Israel in the last 14 years. I was born in Israel to Jewish parents who came to Israel following the Holocaust in 1947, and my father and my mother in 1949. They were amongst the first Messianic Jews in Israel. At that time, there were very, very few. You could count them on one hand. And so it was really very special, unique to grow up in a believing family and to be a witness of the restoration of the spiritual restoration of the people of Israel here in Israel.
Yeah. And Tuvia?
Ja, ska jag ta det på svenska?
Det kan du göra.
Ja. Jag heter Tuvia Pollack. Jag har arbetat på Bibelsällskapet här i Israel de senaste 13 åren. Jag är fjärde generationen av judar som tror på Jesus. Min farfar kom till tro i Tyskland på 20-talet och hans mamma kom till tro efter honom. Vi gjorde Aliyah från Sverige, flyttade till Israel för lite över 20 år sedan. Min familj flyttade efter några år tillbaka till Sverige. Och jag är gift och har barn och bor här i Israel. Det har varit en ganska fantastisk upplevelse också att se hur en messianska, även om vi inte var en del av det från ung ålder, jag växte upp i Sverige, så är det ändå bara från 90-talet och fram till nu att verkligen se hur det har utvecklats och hur det blir fler och fler församlingar och hur Gud verkligen verkar här i sitt folk i Israel, och också se hur det går till här och vara en del av det.
So when we speak about telling other people about Yeshua or Jesus, some things are equal in all over the world. It could be somewhat difficult wherever we go. But some things are special for Israel and the Jewish context. And that will be the topic for tonight. So maybe, Viktor, you could start telling us now the big picture. What are the obstacles for telling Jews about Yeshua?
So I think it's important to share with Jews about the Messiah and who is the Messiah, that there is one way for salvation to whoever you are, whether you're a Jew or not a Jew. But there are some things that we should be aware of when we wanted to have an effective dialogue. I know that God is in control, and sometimes you don't know how and what will cause a person to come to faith. It's the work of God in the heart of a person every time. But still, there are some things that we need to know. And when we speak about the Jews and the way they see Christianity, there are a few things that we need to understand. One is the oneness of God. You know that the central thing in Judaism, even to someone who is not religious, is that there is one God. You know, we as Jews, when I say we, I speak about the Jewish people in general. You know, we understand that we brought monotheism to the world, and that's true. You know, the revelation of God was first to the people of Israel as a nation. And the understanding of the Jewish people is that there is one God. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And now they think that when a Christian, that the Christian faith is that there is three gods, there is the Trinity, and that's already something that it's for them an obstacle. We believe that there is one God. You cannot come and tell us that there is more than one God. So the divinity of the Messiah, as we say, that Jesus is God, is a problem for a Jew that he needs to understand how can it be with the concept of one God, with the truth of one God. Okay, so that's something to remember. And the thing is all the history of hostility between the Jews and the church. This is an historical fact that there was a lot of anti-Semitism in the church already from very early stages. Like, you know, the idea that the Jews killed God or that they are God killers is something that went throughout history and paved the way for even the Holocaust. You know, the Holocaust didn't happen kind of out of nowhere. There was a lot of anti-Semitism among Christian nations to allow something like that to happen, that the Jews are God killers, and all the issue of the Jews drinking the blood of babies and things that, you know, developed throughout history that caused a lot of separation and, of course, the persecution of Jews in the Middle Ages and so on. So that's something that for them, it's in the historical memory of the people of Israel. Definitely when we speak about the Holocaust, something that happened in and amongst Christian nations, it's not something that you can just disregard it and say, hey, you have to be a Christian. Okay, there is something that, there is an elephant in the room, as we say, that we need to clarify. Okay, so that's another thing. Another issue is the place of the Torah and the Old Testament. The way that, you know, for the Jews, the Torah is the sacred book, all the Old Testament, but mainly the Torah. And in Christianity, there is the understanding, of course, that we do not live under the Torah, okay, and that we are under the new covenant. But that's okay. But they see that in the eyes of the Christianity, the Torah is not as important, or it is kind of a second-class book. It is not really the main truth, or the God of the New Testament is a better God of the Old Testament, or some Christians may even say it's not the same God. So that's another problem, that when we come to Jews and tell them, speak with them about the new covenant, we need to realize that they think that Christians see the Old Testament as something which is old, obsolete, and we do not need to believe it, and it's not as important, doesn't worth the same. It's secondary to the new covenant. So that's another thing. And the fourth thing is the issue of Jewish identity. The Jews believe, well, we kept the Torah. The Torah separated us from the other nations. We couldn't eat the same thing. So if I cannot eat with you, I cannot eat the food that you eat, I cannot come and visit with you. I cannot come and have fellowship with you. If my daughters cannot marry your sons, and so on, you know, it created some kind of a separation. And they see it as God kept us, the way this was God's way to keep the people of Israel and keep them as a nation. And it is a fact that many nations disappeared throughout history, but the Jewish people did not. So in their eyes, well, keeping the Torah kept us. And now we cannot just put the Torah away, because we will lose our identity as a nation and we will disappear. So they think that if we become Christians, then the Jewish people will disappear as a nation. Okay, that's why when we'll get to it later, when we speak about the faith in Christ as Jews, we tell them, don't stop being a Jew. your Jewish identity is your ethnicity. You don't lose it when you believe in Yeshua. Okay, you are the same person, you belong to the same people, but your faith is the biblical faith. So these are four things that we need to know. I think that can help us with a faith-based dialogue with people from Jewish background.
Yeah. Trinity, anti-Semitism, place of Torah, and Jewish identity. Yes, four obstacles or four important issues. Now, when we speak about all these obstacles, you could easily imagine there should be no Jewish believers at all if it's that difficult, but that's not the case. How many Jewish believers in Jesus are there in Israel now, Tuvia, and how is that number increasing recently?
It's very hard to know exactly. Most estimates are between 10,000 to 30,000 in Israel. It really depends. Are you only counting ethnic Jews? Are you also counting their spouses? Are you counting temporary Christian visitors or not? Are you and so on? But if you would include anyone who believes in Jesus in all the land of Israel, which would also include the Christian Arabs, then you have 200,000 in Israel. But of believing Jews in Israel, usually at the estimates based on the amount of congregations we know exist and how many in each, it's usually between some say as low as 10 or 15,000, some go as high as 25, 30,000. I think that's, what do you say, Victor? That's about a correct?
Yeah, I would say that it is a good way to present it. I wouldn't compare, the Arab Christians to the Messianic Jews in terms of number, because in Arab Christianity, you have what we call nominal believers, people that come from a Christian background, but they're not necessarily believers. While in the Messianic body, it is such a small body that those who believe in Christ, they are not nominal Messianic Jews, they are really believers.
Exactly.
They are church going, they belong to the body of Messianic believers.
So if we say between 10 and 25, let's say then 20,000, how many? That would be 20,000 and 6 million. 20,000
percentage.
Yeah, that would be 0.3% or something. It's and that number is higher than it used to be like 20, 30, 40 years ago. Isn't it?
Yes, but something to remember, we cannot just look at it in terms of numbers. I can tell you that the impact and how can I say, the awareness of the society to the Messianic movement is much more than its numbers. Like, for example, that the army in Israel is something very meaningful in the society because everyone goes into the army. And the army is kind of a place where, everyone in Israel identifies with it because we know that we need it. And it is kind of a melting pot of our society. So there are hundreds of believers in the Israeli army, and being a melting pot and being a place where every Israeli goes, so there is a chance that almost every person in Israel that serves in the army have met someone who is a believer in it and so on. So that's very meaningful. And we see more and more Messianic Jews in the Israeli society in different places. So 20,000 people is already a meaningful number that has a weight in the society, and it is very noticeable. I can tell you that, I checked in 2020 how many articles there were in the newspapers about Messianic Jews. So you have more than 10 articles in 1 year. Most of them were positive. So it is much more noticeable, and there is a growing awareness in the Israeli society to this movement, to the point that there is an understanding that there is another group of Jews. So there are Orthodox Jews, There are Reform Jews, there are conservative, there are all kinds of Jews, and there is also Messianic Jews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good thing. That gives hope. Now, one more question. What do people in Israel in general, I mean, religious, secular, etc., think about Yeshua and his followers? What are their concepts when they hear either Yeshua or Yeshua? What do they think? Tuvia, would you like to start?
I would say that the general knowledge about the general population, if they hear specifically Yeshua or Yeshu, they it's not necessarily, unless they are religious, it's not necessarily something that he was bad or evil, but generally they think of him as a Jewish rabbi who sort of created a fringe movement which became a separate religion with time, which that he sort of created a separatist movement, I would say, and with so much Gentile influence that it became a Gentile religion. In most history classes, they teach about him. That there are some even religious people who sort of, well, he was a good rabbi, but people distorted what he said afterwards. Other people say that he taught incorrect things based on some legends from the Talmud. But it really depends. I would say most Israelis do not have a negative view of Jesus himself, although they might have a negative negative view of the religion that came after him,
mm-hmm.
and
his followers. I would say that's.
Yeah. What would be your reflection about that, Viktor?
I think that Tuvia is right, that when you speak about the general society, it's not necessarily that they think bad of him, and even using the name Yeshu that comes from not a good intention, but they don't know. That's the name by which they know him. But that's the general public, I would say. And also today, the society is much more open than it used to be. So imagine that you come and speak to Jews about Jesus the day after the Holocaust, and you come and tell them, well, you have to believe and become a Christian. Of course, that you will be getting a lot of fire. But today it's totally different. However, I would say that amongst Orthodox Jews, there is more hostility to the idea of Jew believing in Jesus. They don't have a problem if a Christian believes in Jesus. That's not a problem. So they don't have a problem with that. That's okay if you're a Gentile and you believe in Jesus. They see it as something natural in a sense. But they do not believe in him, and they don't think that he is really sent by God and that he's not the Messiah. So of course they are against it, and they see it as going out of Judaism. If you as a Jew believe in Christ, you actually cross the line from being a Jew and you chose not to be a Jew. And sometimes in order to prevent young people and so on from going this way or even exploring it, they would say things that are not good about him. Look what happened to us under Christianity. Look what happens to us, and all the anti-Semitism is also because of that. They see us as God killers and so on and so forth. So you do have parts in the society, mainly Orthodox Jews, that they don't want it, and that they think that a lot of bad things happened to Jewish people because of Christianity.
Yeah, so there is a mix, and Gentile believers in Jesus, that's fine, that's okay, but Jewish believers would be more problematic for them. But how do you, when you tell some new neighbor or some colleague or some person you didn't know, that you meet them and you present yourself, you are Israel, you live here, and you are a believer in Yeshua, what words and how do you present yourself and your faith and your convictions? What do you say to a new person, Viktor?
So we use the term Messianic Jew because it's important to convey that we did not become Gentiles when we believe in Yeshua, that we are still Jews and it is a Jewish faith. So that's something which is important. I mentioned the importance of the Jewish identity for Jews. It's important for them to remain Jews, and I think it's a good thing, you know, and I think God has a calling for the Jewish people, and he wants to use them, and he has promises for them as a nation. So that's okay, and that's good. So we want to convey to them that believing in Yeshua does not make you a Gentile if you are a Jew. You are still a Jew. And I usually say that believing in Yeshua completes my Jewish identity. It doesn't go against it. It's actually completing it, because that's the truth of the Bible from the very beginning, from the Old Testament all along. And I would try, usually in my conversation, to base it on the Old Testament, to show how from the Old Testament it brings us to the Messiah. So for example, I mean, I'll make it short, but one of the main things in the Old Testament is all the system of the sacrifices, the temple and the presence of God and the need for a sacrifice for sin and so on, that we do not have today. And the fact that lambs and animal sacrifice, they were temporary because you have to do it every year again. So they were symbol to something which is eternal that should come. They were pointing to the eternal, but they themselves were not the eternal. They were the symbol, the shadow of something to come. And that's true for all the things that are in the Old Testament. And the principles of a need for a sacrifice to atone for sin, and the need for a justification in order to be in the presence of God, this is something that you can explain through the Old Testament. So many of the Christian principles are principles that are based and founded in the Old Testament. God did not change his principles. They were there all along. And I try to show it from there, and then I can show from the Old Testament that Yeshua fulfills all the requirements of the Old Testament and all the prophecies to be the Messiah, to be the atonement that God planned from the very beginning to everyone, to the Jews and to the Gentiles.
But let me then, you explain the sacrifices, because now there has been no temple for 2,000 years and no sacrifices, and most of the rabbinic theologies state that there is no need for sacrifices, at least not right now. Or how do you explain that, or what do you tell them?
So actually, it helps to explain it, because we do say that God did not obsolete it. God did not say that it is not needed anymore, but the Judaism went through a crisis when the temple was destroyed, because the temple was the center of all the religious procedures or the faith. It was the center. People will have to come 3 times a year to the temple. People had to come with sacrifices and so on. And now that it does not exist, and that they did not receive the eternal sacrifice that God sent, which is according, for example, to the prophecy in Daniel. Daniel has a prophecy in which there is timeline of when the Messiah will be cut off. And if you do the calculation, it brings you to the Passover Eve, when Yeshua was crucified. So you can see from the Old Testament that God did not change his mind. His principles are eternal, okay? And we can show it from Leviticus 11:17, that says that only through the blood of the sacrifice there is atonement of sin, for example. Already in the Garden of Eden, that when Adam and Eve sinned, they tried to cover the sin themselves, but God supplied skins instead of the fig leaves that they put, to cover their shame. So another principle, that God is the one that provides a covering for the sin. We cannot do it by our own. And the sin brought death, because of this sin, God had to cover them with skins, and skin can come only from animals, even in the Garden of Eden. I mean, these are just few examples, but through that, you can show all the principles of the faith from the Old Testament, even from the Torah, and definitely from the prophets. Isaiah 53 is very clear. It's a very strong statement of who is the Messiah, and that is actually God that will come, you know, to be this sacrifice for everyone. So actually, the fact that there is no temple today does not come against this explanation, but actually strengthen it, because it is a man-made solution, you know, that people came, or rabbis tried to overcome, to fix, if I can use this word, the crisis in Judaism by creating all kind of man-made halachot. How do you say halacha? Traditions.
Yeah, human traditions.
That they continue to follow today because they did not want to receive Yeshua. They did not want to receive what he has done. So once you put these away, you have to find substitutes. And these were all kind of substitutes.
Thank you. What would you say, Tuvia, when you are telling somebody, neighbor, somebody you haven't met, you say, hey, I'm Tuvia, my faith is like this and that. What do you say?
Well, Viktor gave a good explanation of how we very shortly also explain the gospel. I'm usually less, I'm a bit more shy about sharing, you know, trying to evangelize right away, even though I sometimes get there. But I usually just I will say that I'm Jewish, that I'm Israeli. I'm part of the Israeli society. But the Judaism I believe in is a bit different than the regular Orthodox or even Reformed Judaism. I believe in what we call Messianic Judaism. When they ask and when they question and ask what it means, I usually say that, well, faith, especially if I talk to non-religious, they are usually very aware that the evangelical Christians are some of Israel's closest friends. So in order to not disconnect them and think that I'm some sort of disconnected from Israel, I usually say that faith-wise, it's very similar to the evangelical Christianity, but culture-wise, I'm part of the people of Israel. I celebrate the Jewish holidays. I'm an Israeli. That's usually in order to give them like really, really shortly to understand what it is. But I might also say, you know, look, there are Jewish religious ways of life that do not go according to the Talmud and the Halacha, like the Karaite Jews, for example. The Messianic Jews is just another type of Judaism. There are other Jews who believe that the Messiah has already come, like Rabbi Schneerson, and we believe that the Messiah has already come, that he's Yeshua, you know. So I'm trying to explain that it's a part of Judaism. I see it as a part of Judaism, but I don't necessarily disconnect either from the evangelical Christians.
Would they accept this, that Messianic Jews would be compared to like one group in addition, like the Schneerson movement, the Karaites, that there exist?
Well, they don't accept the Karaites as Jews either. So it's
yeah, okay. When we speak about Jesus, in English we call him Jesus, but in Hebrew there is Yeshua, and some people, or most of them, of the Israelis, use Yeshua. Could you explain why and why not, and what's the meaning in the background, and why do we insist on Yeshua?
Well, Yeshua is his original name. It's, I mean, you can't be 100% sure, but everything points to Yeshua being his original name. And it's a long story to go into but it's 99.99% was his original name. In Jewish tradition, ever since medieval times and earlier, in the Jewish sources, he has always been called Yeshu. And some people say that that is an abbreviation for may his name be, like it's a curse, may his name be destroyed, which is probably the truth. Other people claim that that Yeshu without the A at the end is just the way that the Galileans used to pronounce it, and that has sort of stayed in tradition since the time of Jesus. I think that's more of a way to try to justify continuing to use it. But that's basically what you will hear if you are asking someone who knows. But most Israelis have no idea. Most Israelis just, they know Yeshua, and they have very few even know that Yeshua is his original name, or some might have some sort of idea that, well, his actual name was Yeshua, but we prefer to call him Yeshua. And when I spoke to a religious person about it, he says, I would never be able to call him Yeshua because that means salvation, and I can't confess with my mouth that he is salvation, so I have to call him Yeshua.
Yeah, his task is within his name.
Exactly.
Yeah. Viktor, how do you, when you tell the gospel and people have this mindset of, of course, for a Gentile person, Jesus could be important, but as a Jew, we manage without him. How do you explain that Yeshua is important for every single Jew, and of course, anybody in the among the humans, but we speak about the Jews in Israel right now. How do you explain that?
So, of course, that we explain the need, as I mentioned before, of fellowship with God, and that at the end, each one of us will stand before God, and we need to have a solution for our sin, because the sin separates us from God. And I explained it again from the Torah. We see it throughout the Torah, even from the beginning when Adam and Eve sinned. God said, if you will eat, then you will surely die. Not you will die, you will surely die. And we saw that they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden. So separation from God, this is the real death, because physical death is something that every person goes through. Whether you are righteous or evil, you die. The physical body dies. But the real death is the separation from God. And if you're separated from God throughout eternity, then this is really death. But if you are not separated from God, then you do not die, you live. So that's kind of, one way by which I explain the need. And I explain that we see throughout the Bible that the only way to have fellowship with God is that if we have a solution for the sin. We see it even in the Psalms. We see it in many places in the law, and it is only through faith. It says about Abraham that Abraham believed and God considered it to him as righteousness. So righteousness, it's not by our deeds, it is by our faith, and the deeds are the fruit of our faith. So, of course, these are things that I think many believers know, and I just base it and I show it from the Old Testament. The fact that, in Jeremiah 31, it says, I will make a new covenant with the house of Judah and with the house of Israel. So the new covenant is mentioned already by the prophet Jeremiah explicitly. He says, I will make a new covenant, not like the one that I made with them when I took them out of Egypt. Okay, and this new covenant is with their heart, and this new covenant, I will forgive their sins and remember them no more. So these are very biblical principles that we have all over the Bible, if you want to believe it. Find it through the Bible, and I show that through the Bible, the only one that actually answers the requirements of the Old Testament for the Messiah is Yeshua. He's the only one. He came, 2,000 years ago at the right place, where exactly like Daniel prophesied, he was born as from a virgin, and this is, we read it in Isaiah 7:14, and the virgin shall give birth. And in Zechariah 12 it says, and they will look upon the one whom they have pierced. So there are many places by which we can show that it speaks to Yeshua. Is always, it's not that they come and say, well, I have a proof that it is not. It is many times, most of the times, it is, well, it is not Jewish. I'm sure that the rabbis has another explanation, and I need to go and ask. But the good thing is that everybody in Israel is growing, and that's the thing. We do see that the local congregations are growing. We started with a very small body of believers some years ago. There were very few, really few. Today there are thousands of them, so it is growing. And you talked about believers in Israel, but we need not to forget that there are many Messianic Jews in other countries, like in the United States. They estimate there are more than 200,000 Messianic Jews in the United States. And I believe that many of them, one day or another, they will come to Israel, because we see that anti-Semitism is growing in the world. And when you are a Messianic Jew, there is always this connection to Israel. There is connection to the Jewish people. And I think that there is kind of an urge to come and live in Israel, just that the conditions are not yet made for that. And it is happening with the time. So the body is growing internally, but it is growing also as more Jews abroad that come to Israel as believers.
Yeah, I have one more question. I'm thinking about now that you, as Messianic Jews living in Israel, how you manage to communicate the gospel using the Tanakh, the Old Testament. What about most of us here today? We are Swedish and we have no Jewish ancestry at all, but we would like to travel to Israel once the pandemic is over. Do you have some advice? How can we participate in being witnesses about Yeshua in Israel? Be that the tour guide or whoever we meet on the street that would like to talk to us or something. What should we say, or what can we do? Tuvia, do you have some?
Viktor?
Okay, Viktor.
So I think that love is very important. God is love, Yeshua is love, and we need to be a good testimony of our faith, which is based on the love of God and the grace of God to us. So before theology and before argument, who is right and who is wrong, I think that it is important to be a good testimony and to show love. So that's I think something that very important. Today to Jews, Israelis, they go through a lot of criticism in the world. And I think that when you speak about Swedish people, they do understand it, that Israel is not so much fond, in the Swedish media and so on. It's a country, Israel, that is very much criticized, the politics and many other things, all the Palestinian-Arab conflict. So I think that first of all, it's important to show love. I think that many times Israelis, when they see Christian countries, they say, well, we're Christians, we know the Bible, but they blame Israel for occupying the land and that we don't need to be here and there. So they say, how can you criticize us for things like that, where the Bible says that, God gave this land to the people of Israel, things like that. So for them, it is like, what Bible do you read? But even take away the political things, they are affecting, but because it is the context, where we live today. But I think to show love, and that's the key. In Romans it says, Romans I think 11, Paul says to the Gentiles, he says, in the way that you have been shown mercy, you have to show this mercy to the Jewish people in order to cause them to jealousy. So I would say this is a key to show love.
Tuvia, would you have something to add? Or
yeah, I think that's probably a good summary. To show love to, and maybe to emphasize that the Bible and your faith in Jesus is what creates your love for Israel, that it's not just a humanitarian or that you see it as a political issue, but the reason that you love Israel and the reason that you know that the people of Israel have a right to the land of Israel is because you believe in the God of Israel, because you believe that you can tell them, even if you might disagree, I believe that Jesus is the Messiah of Israel, and I believe in the God of Israel, and therefore I believe that the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. I think that can be quite powerful, that you're using scriptures as a reason for love in that way.
I would add to that again. I know that going into politics, it can be problematic, because you never know what the other side would say about it. But I think that even the fact that recognizes the place of Israel in the Bible, and there is a lot of theologies today that basically replaces Israel with the church and things like that. Of course, that this immediately creates an obstacle, because even Israelis that, or Jews that don't believe the Jewish identity is very important for them. So I think that understanding that even as Christian Gentiles, you do see the connection of God with the people of Israel, and that the understanding that God still have a calling, and that He wants the people of Israel back to Himself, is something that can cause them, can open doors, can kind of create a bridge to their hearts.
Yes, thank you. Now, does anybody have some comment or additional questions for Tuvia and Viktor? So please feel free. Är det någon mer som har en fråga eller en kommentar? You can say it in English. Eller så ni kan säga en fråga på svenska, så ska vi översätta.
I have a question on when it comes to the Messianic Jews, the coverage of Messianic Jews or the movement in the media, like television and radio and newspapers. How is that today?
You're asking how is it being covered in the media?
Yeah, in the Israeli media.
Well, many times you will have an article about, like, for example, there was just now recently an article about a Messianic Jew that is serving in a special unit in the army, and they found out that he's a Messianic Jew. So this is something which is outstanding and special, that there is an officer in this special unit, but he is a Messianic Jew. So this is something which is positive. It actually tells the public that, well, Messianic Jews, they serve like every one of us. They take part in the obligations, and they are in special units, for example. And there were many cases like that. There was another one that finished a naval officers course just recently. I did this course 30 years ago. I was a naval officer, but now after 30 years, there's another one. So they made an interview about him, and actually he's not a Jew, and he's from a German origin, and he's serving now as an officer in the Israeli Navy, but he believes, and he's part of the Jewish Messianic body. He's married to a Messianic Jew. So they had an article about him. These are just like, they had an article about the place where I live. It's a Christian community, Messianic Jewish community. So they had an article about these Messianic Jewish community in the mountains of Jerusalem, and so on and so forth. So there are different things that are happening, and once in a while you will have a topic in the newspaper about Messianic Jews. So in these ways it comes to the awareness of the public. Like some time ago there was an article about the different groups in the Jewish society. So they were also having a part about Messianic Jews as one of the groups in the Israeli Messianic society. Okay, there are many ways. It's not like one way, but it is there. And every now and then there is a topic that relates to Messianic Jews that will come to the newspapers.
And we speak about the mainline newspapers.
Yes,
yeah,
definitely.
Somebody else? Yeah, if there is no more questions, I would say thank you very much for participating all the way from Israel. The technology is helping us right now, even though, of course, we would have wished to be together in another sense, in the same room. That's even better to to speak together and to have fellowship and to eat together and to speak and to pray and all these things. But thank you for participating from Jerusalem and from each and every home in Sweden. So God bless.
Thank you very much for having us, and we would have liked to be with you and enjoy fellowship together, I'm sure. So I'm sure that, it can happen in the near future again. So anyways, thank you so much.
Passa på att tacka också. Det har varit, vi hoppas verkligen att vid tillfälle att vi ska kunna träffas, men verkligen tack för att ni bjöd in oss och för att ni är intresserade överhuvudtaget. Det är inte en självklarhet heller.
Come and visit us in the Bible Society when you come to Israel. You are most welcome.
Yes.
We will come. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Okej.
Hej då.
Shavua tov.
Shalom.
Tov.